This episode is sponsored by Anna from the Angus the Dog fan club. Hello and welcome back to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson and this is episode 65, talking social media, personal branding and more with Gillian Dick, part 1. In last week's show, I looked at rejection and how we can build resilience against the knocks and misfortunes of adversity and the rejections that we face in life. And I might have been a little bit ranty here and there, and I did a kind of final edit on it, which hopefully removed some of my ranting. But I've had my fair share of knocks over the years. But the advice is very good in it, and it's definitely one that you should have a listen to. I just think that in this world, this creative world that many of us that listen to are working in, rejection is a bit of a killer, so that's why I did that episode. But today I am talking to a very good friend of mine, social media specialist and marketing expert Gillian Dick, and we talk about many things here, but take a very specific look at personal branding and social media. Now, I've split this discussion over 2 episodes as it actually ran to 1.5 hours even after the edit, but it was just too good for me to cut any shorter. Part 2, episode 66, will be released just shortly after this one. For now, though, please enjoy the show. And here she is, Gillian Dick. How are you doing?
Good morning, Carter. How are you?
I am very well. This is us pretending we haven't just done a 15-minute pre-show chat. I'm very well, but I didn't actually ask you at the time. How are you doing?
I'm surviving. I'm adjusting to working from home. It's been almost a month now, so yeah, it's been very interesting times.
Well, one of the things I've not talked about on the show is working from home with a family. I just say you should do this stuff, but I'd realise that some people, like I'm living on my own here. I don't have to worry about children and stuff like that. But how's it working with you having a young family?
Well, yeah, in the past, I always used to think I can't do this because the kids are about. And what I've realised now is that you just have to suck it up and get on with it. I've learned that it's really important to sort of plan my days better, make the most of the quiet time, whether that be in the evening or early morning. And I do have to break my days up a wee bit more, and sort of incentivise them. At the moment, they've got a new Lego set, so that should keep them quite happy for the next hour or so while we do this. But yeah, I was very nervous about it because I do a lot of workshops, I do a lot of face-to-face, and I've had to move that all over to platforms like Zoom.
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious that people can hear me, but if people can see me as well, I always kind of set it up that I have a couple of co-workers from home and they may make an appearance. And usually people like that because they can relate to it. But yeah, it's interesting. So we're doing all right. And it's not a bad thing for them to actually understand what work is and maybe learn some boundaries as well. So that's my positive slant on it, shall we say?
I mean, I think it's a good thing as well. I at the same time, I know that I'm kind of lucky that I don't have to worry about it. I can't help but think of that BBC reporter, or was it the politician? Was it somebody getting interviewed, and his children came in, and the nanny kept in behind, and it definitely made him more popular. And he comes back on. There's spoofs of that on, I don't know, The Simpsons or whatever's probably done it by now. It's just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just humanizes individuals and it makes them so much more relatable. And we can all laugh about it because that's the sort of thing that we sort of secretly dread and fear. And going to work, it's easy to go and deliver your session and, your performance, if you like. But the reality is there's so much more to coordinate when you are in the house. And if it's not a big house, I'm just so mindful of so many other things. I would say I was like a swan. I'm sort of graceful, and on screen I'm trying to appear very sort of like together, but behind the scenes and underneath everything's going like crazy, thinking, right, who's going to run into the room? What's going to happen? How do you keep your cool and manage this? So yeah, so that's it.
Yep. Well, I've been looking you up this morning, as I like to, even though I know you, just so people know, we meet up quite regularly. Try to meet up maybe once a month, once every 2 months, and just shoot the breeze about stuff because you're into productivity as well. And if I had a mastermind group, you're certainly one of my masterminds. But Your LinkedIn page says that you help organisations to manage their online reputation effectively, and you describe yourself there as a social media specialist, which is certainly true. But can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you offer to businesses that work with you?
Yes, about 11 years ago, I had started up my first business and I didn't have a lot of money. And I looked at social media as a viable platform for amplifying my message, growing the reach, and driving traffic to my website. And not to kind of blow my trumpet, but in 2010, I won the Glasgow Business Award for Best Use of Social Media. And what actually happened, it was a sort of pivotal moment because what I'd originally set out to do with my first business, it was having success with the social media that actually gave birth to my second business, which is what I'm still doing today, because people started to come to me and approach me and say, you know what you're doing, can you help me? And I thought, wait a minute, this is just, it's crazy to sort of walk away from this. And it started with businesses who maybe the individuals had shied away from things like Facebook, or they had used it personally, but they didn't have the confidence to use it in a professional and a sort of commercial context.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I've done has always been about marketing, branding, and how you come across. So it's really taking those kind of traditional values and applying them to more modern platforms. But I very slowly started to work with individuals, and every client I work with is different. There is no one size fits all, but it might be one individual who is looking at their LinkedIn and they just kind of struggle with how to sort of get across what they do. But a lot of it, I would say, is you've got to kind of be who your customer wants you to be. And if you're looking to attract a certain sort of demographic as well, they have to be able to see themselves within your business or products or services or whatever you offer. So it's sort of helping them understand a bit more of the sort of psychology, and also presenting themselves in a really positive way that they create a rich digital sort of footprint. So if someone Googles you, just like you said you Googled me, it's very much about businesses and individuals being in control of what somebody discovers about them. And that doesn't mean to say that it's fake or untrue, that it's sort of online reputation management. And the people who aren't really bothered with it or have shied away, it's something that they can't really ignore, because it might be unbeknown to you, but there'll be people out there that will be writing reviews about whether it's your films, your products, your services, you as a person. And if you're not active on the digital sort of platforms and social media, they're the ones that are creating your reputation for you. So people were starting to wake up to the kind of idea that they didn't have a great understanding. And of course, because I'd won an award back in 2010, I was deemed an expert. And I used to say, well, I'm not an expert, I just know what I'm doing. But it does all come down to strategy at the end of the day. It's all about having a plan. What do you want to achieve? And I've been very lucky that I've been able to not just make a living, but really sort of turn things around. And the last sort of decade has been pretty phenomenal. And it's been an amazing journey as well, because I've worked with lots of different companies and individuals. And every day for me is a school day, but you're always learning. And you're sort of finding out their story and then helping them tell that story. So in a nutshell, yes, I can manage businesses' social media, but I can help individuals. And really, I believe that nobody knows your business better than you do. And you have the answers. My job is just to help you bring those to the surface and get comfortable being uncomfortable and sort of putting stuff out that people want to read and see, because the appetite for content is huge. And especially in a time like right now, more people are online and they're always looking for new stuff. So it's a great way to be discovered.
Yeah, you made a few great points there, but I'm thinking so much about what you said laterally that I'm not sure where I'm going with the question I'm forming. I tell you what, let me just move on briefly, because I talk about you quite often, and I'll have a think about it and come back to you on this. But tell us in the meantime about sell the sizzle, not the sausage. What do you mean when you say that? I've used it myself a few times. I always do try to credit you because you brought it to me.
So in a nutshell, I've always been in sales, and even like marketing and stuff nowadays, we're all selling stuff, whether it's ourselves or our products or services. But when people try to get their message across, sometimes they get a bit confused, or they don't actually focus on the benefits to their customer. So they talk about features, and what my old boss, I used to have a boss who was from Barnsley in Yorkshire. I can't do the accent. I'm not even going to attempt to do it. But the one thing he used to say, and he came out with some great sort of one-liners, was, you sell the sizzle, not the sausage. And a lot of people talk about, this sounds wrong, but a lot of people talk about their sausage, right? They talk about their business, they talk about their product, they talk about features, and it does this and it does that, but it's focusing on, forget about that, it's what does it mean? What are the benefits? So if you've got, for example, a new piece of software or equipment, it's like, does it work faster? Does it process faster? Does that mean you can get more done? And it's focusing very much on the benefits as opposed to just the features. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I have to keep on reminding myself of this. I mean, the only promotion that I kind of, not the only promotion, but the major promotion that I do is for the podcast. And
yes,
I do keep yanking myself back to selling the sizzle, putting out there what people are saying about it rather than me telling people what it does. And this is why I'm always asking for people to give me like feedback or reviews and stuff as well, because it's really great to be able to quote, like on a postcard I made up to promote the show. It's not got an image, really. It's just got about 7 different quotes from people who say they love the show and it's great and that people should listen to it. Because I think that people will look at the title of my show and go, well, I'm not a film pro, or, you know, this just sounds boring, or maybe productivity is to do with something else. And they'll go, right, I'm not really interested in that. But if you kind of go, put these people's opinions down, people go, oh, what do they know that I don't know? And it kind of pulls them in. But like, that's a good example of what I do. But I do a lot of stuff just totally wrong. And I'm actually trying to rethink the entirety of how I promote, from the images that I use through to the content that I release to promote the show, and when I release it, to try and take on this sell the sizzle, not the sausage thing. Do you think that's a right thing for me to be thinking about, or do you think I'm going too far down that line?
No, I mean, it's spot on. I mean, what I would say is, like, if you think about films, for example, when they are being promoted, people will quite often talk about the kind of the big names in the film, people that are involved. And that is very much selling the sizzle. You know, having young children, not to drop names and stuff, but Trolls, I think, World's movie or World Series or something, it was premiering this weekend, just gone. But because the cinemas are all closed, you're able to get it on demand. So as a wee treat, we had a movie night and I downloaded it. And to be honest, I didn't really watch it. I listened to a lot of stuff that my kids watch. And but I could hear like James Corden in there and various different people. And it is that thing. It's like, if you like somebody and they're involved in a film, that would make me probably watch it or download it or whatever it might be. So, you know, I've just paid 10 quid for that for them to have it for 48 hours. But it is that whole thing of like, you know, just what's in it for them and what's so good about it. And it's focusing on the reader as opposed to you.
Yeah.
I mean, even in my world, I've come across a lot of people who will think that getting the youngest member of their team or a student to manage their social media is the solution. And I'm not poo-pooing it, but what I would say is that the difference is these people don't have the same life experience. They may know how to gram and get likes and things, but it's the tangible business experience and the understanding. So the sizzle for me is that, you know, I have that experience and I can help them actually get a tangible return as opposed to just likes and vanity metrics. So, you know, people might just look at it and say, well, I can get them cheap and they're young and they know what they're doing, but they could be playing Russian roulette with your reputation.
Absolutely.
Because if something goes out there and it's not right, it's out there. So,
and that actually was what I was going to talk about earlier when I lost my train of thought. See, this is the trouble I've found when I'm interviewing people, is I start to become the podcast listener by accident, forgetting that I am actually the podcast host. But it was the point you brought up earlier was about controlling your own social media, your own online reputation, and it was specifically about bad reviews, which is something that is a very, very common thing that filmmakers or creatives that are doing theatre or whatever have to suffer from, because people will come in and just completely destroy you for no reason other than that they're on a high horse, they've got their own opinion, and they might not even have seen what you're actually offering either. So I think it's something you have to ignore. I mean, I ignore trolls. If a troll messages me, which will happen maybe once a month, I'll get a horrible message about something I've done and I'll just block them right away. But when that's a publicly printed or, you know, digitally printed statement that's a bigger problem. But I do hope that when that happens, the volume of my own controlled content, my websites, my good deeds that I've done through the podcast or whatever, will make people go, well, actually, I don't believe that this is a bad show, or this is, whatever, because these other 30 people have said good things about it. And
absolutely,
but I think it's definitely a problem that we face.
Yeah, it applies to so many people and businesses. I mean, if it's individuals leaving negative comments, you've got to sort of look at it and think, okay, do I even give it any kind of time? Do I respond to it, or just let it be? Because there are trolls, that's just sometimes how they function, or keyboard warriors, as they might be called as well, which is a slightly more polite way. But if you think about newspapers and even kind of bigger sort of news outlets and things, if they're writing something that's maybe not as kind, what you've got to remember fundamentally is good news doesn't sell stories. It's the power of a headline. And I see so much in my sort of day-to-day job working with businesses where, something will be put down and it's very misleading. And if somebody reads that and gets the wrong end of the stick, or doesn't take the time to actually get the full facts, then you maybe don't want them as a customer anyway. But I do believe that if you have a good digital footprint, if you have, like you say, your good stuff out there, people can make their own informed decision. And the easiest way to sort of generalise it is, if you think about TripAdvisor, we probably all have a look at TripAdvisor. Yeah. And if I'm going somewhere or thinking about going somewhere, I tend to look at what the negative reviews are and what they say. And then I kind of decide, well, do they have a point, or is that just more about that person and they just like to moan? And if I don't identify with that person that's leaving the review, like I'm a bit of a snob in the sense of if their punctuation's poor and they can't spell, I'm already sort of going, well, I'm discounting their point, and especially if they swear and things like that as well. So there's a great thing I saw, and it was a lion doesn't lose opinions over those of sheep or something like that. And it is kind of one of those things you have to just kind of lift your head up and keep your chin up and just get on with it. But if you don't have anything and you're not active, now especially is the time to start getting on it. And it doesn't all have to be your content. It can just be things that you're commenting on, sharing. But whatever you are sharing on your account, that will kind of align with your beliefs. So again, it's all about, there's a lot that can come across, your values and stuff like that as well. So yeah, it's a good time to get on social media and be a wee bit more visible, shall we say.
Yeah, it does no harm at all. One thing, just to pick on something you said a little bit earlier, was about spending, in effect, about spending money, about paying for someone with experience over getting your junior staff member or your wee cousin. to
absolutely.
This is something probably in the last year that I've done, maybe in the last 2 years I've done a lot more of than I did before. And it's a difficult thing for me to spend money in regard to the podcast, because the podcast only costs me money. There is no income from it. But because I've been able to get sponsors for episodes, I do have a little bit of budget there to put into things. And with other stuff that I do pay for a website and stuff for my Fight Direction business. And I think it's important that people at least now consider that spending money is not a bad thing. Do you find that there's a bit of a pushback about people just spending a little bit of money, knowing that they could do so much more if they just spent the money on the right things or the right people?
Yeah.
I don't know if that sentence even makes sense, that question makes sense, but where are you with all this?
What I would say is that there is always pushback in everything when it comes to spending money, but it does boil down to if you can afford, like get the best that you can afford, because it will take things to another level. If you want to try and do everything yourself, it'll always be a smaller cake. But if you can bring other experts in and maybe share some of that, or however you do it, whether you pay them or give them a share or whatever it might be, you can have a bigger piece of a bigger pie sort of thing. Yeah. So I suppose it's a wee bit like the Fast Romance stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because we met on my first feature film, Fast Romance, and you did some really incredible work with not a particularly large budget on it. And you didn't just arrange social media stuff for that either. You handled marketing a bit more broadly. And how did you make all of that work so well? Because we got away with it.
Okay, so, I mean, how I came across Fast Romance was down to social media in the first instance. There was a call out via a friend who had seen that you were looking for extras. So again, there you go. Social media was already playing a part, and it was a valuable tool. Myself and two friends came along. We had a bit of fun. No idea, not from the kind of film industry or background, so really didn't even know how to behave, sort of thing. But as the film was getting put together and my first business was talking about, I could see an opportunity for us potentially to do a wee bit more work together. But like you, I didn't have any money. I was doing everything on an absolute shoestring. So it was about a bit of a trade, I suppose, of our skill set. And fast forward, we start working a bit more together. And it's not just about me being a wee extra. It's about helping you maybe get more visibility for the film. Because at the end of the day, if that's successful, then who knows where it can lead. So I'm not saying you do stuff for free all the time, but you've got to think about the bigger picture. And if you can cut your teeth and have some success, then that, to be honest, sometimes can be worth more going forward, that you can present that in future projects and say, for example, we had a Facebook page, a Twitter account. We weren't using Instagram then because it was back in sort of 2010, 2011. But, what I've realised very, very quickly in life is that if you want anything, you have to, A, go out and get it. But the chances are, if you don't know the person that you want to speak to, somebody that you do know could probably put you in touch. So you had managed to get the film into Cineworld, which was a huge thing. It was just unfortunate that summer we had particularly good weather and the cinemas were a bit quieter. But I mean, we had that thing where all the sort of, I don't know what you call those posters outside the cinema, the proper name, but we had a series of those all round. And I mean, I'm sure that was blowing the budget. But that was probably blowing the budget getting enough printed. But we had all them. So again, you take a picture of that, and the perception and the reality are two different things. You've spent a couple £100 getting these posters done, but the reality is, here is Cineworld, which I believe that particular one is the tallest one in Europe.
It's the biggest one in the UK, not just the tallest, the largest cinema in the UK.
So it's pretty significant. It's pretty significant. The man or woman on the street doesn't know how the film's in there, but they will go with the perception and go, wow, it must be really good. So we then go to social media, we look at the people who've already engaged with the film. And again, they all know you in some shape or form or have been an extra or whatever. But you look to engage that audience and reach their friends and so on and so forth. And it was just like when the BAFTA audience won, the award came up with the kind of Cineworld audience vote, it just made sense to sort of try and harness the power of social media and get those supporters voting for Fast Romance. And on the back of that, yes, there was time put into that, but the reality was we got a result. We got enough people to actually take 2 minutes to vote, directed them to do it. They voted. The film got the award, which helped you take it to other places as well. And, it's a great thing for me to be able to sort of share with other people as well, because I can say, well, we're award winning, we've done this, we've done that. And that goes back to, you sell the sizzle, not the sausage. Because if I was to say we did that with a budget of less than £100 for Facebook ads, people would go, what? But it's amazing what you can do when you've got the focus. And that was just down to a few of us digging deep and just getting on with it. And at that time I had an office in the city centre. I'd done a wee bit of a kind of project over the summer with interns, giving people experience, and some of them actually ended up staying on to work with me for about three and a half years, which was great. But what I did was I sat down with you, we agreed a plan. I couldn't do it all, but I got them to help sort of manage parts of it, and I kind of directed them. And they got great experience that they could put on their CVs and stuff as well. So although that might seem like a bit of a contradiction, what I was saying earlier on about younger people and people without experience, if you've got somebody that wants the experience and it's relevant, yes, but you still need to work. You still need to have a leader, I feel like. You still need to have somebody that's kind of, right, this is the direction we're taking. So that was my role, but I wanted to do it because I could see the bigger picture. And, we're still friends to this day. It's quite different what we do, but our paths could and would cross as well. And you can apply these kind of principles to any industry. So we had a budget, a micro budget, and we used to do things and maybe get the cast to sign posters and give them away as competitions. And it's just like some of the best stuff is the simplest, but it's all about the execution at the end of the day. You can have the best ideas, but if you don't do it, forget it.
It was great. In fact, one of the great things that I like about you is that you don't go, I think we should do this. You say, let's do this, this, and this. And it's nice to have someone who's not creating questions in your mind, but saying, this is what we're going to do. This is my advice. You should do this, and it gives me the confidence. If I was to have had to, I mean, I was exec producer on it. I was a producer in the sense that it was my production company at the time. Our production company, there was 4 of us involved in it that made it. But I was also directing it. If I had to, on top of it, and this is what comes up again and again with short films that I've been involved in, is you're having to do all the promotion for it as well. You're kind of dead. You're burnt out by the time you've got to do that. So having somebody like you on board really, really made a difference. And just incidentally, the posters cost £12 each at that point. It wasn't just a few £100. I think it was about £500 we spent on posters.
So that's significant, especially when you're doing it in a 50 grand budget or something.
Yeah, well, it didn't even get to 50 grand. That was the aimed budget. I think we shot it on 31, 32, something like that. We were about 10, 11, something like that on legal fees, and then there was just a few grand afterwards. I think we were just shy of 50 grand in total, and that was for all post-production and promotion. But you gave us a great piece of advice as well, is you were straight up about it and said, look, you don't have enough money to do TV ads and billboards and stuff like that. And I always remember as well, just as an aside, that Ned's was getting released the same week as us. And the poster for Ned's, according to the cinema, cost 40 grand, which was more than we shot our entire film on. So just the poster was massive, by the way. It was the full height of the building. It was a very cool poster, and Ned's is a good film, but like we were struggling. And you advised us to spend money on the social network, and you did a little bit of leaflet handout with your interns as well. But you said spend the money in the cinemas, advertise where the people are, and I think that was a great piece of advice as well. And I kind of still take that advice now in regard to the podcast, because I keep thinking of how can I advertise this to people who already listen to podcasts, and I would only probably have that opinion because you at that point said spend your money in the cinema. And I think we had standees made up, didn't we, for each cinema? We were in 7 cinemas, so standees and
we did.
Posters. And it was trailed as well, and that was another big thing that happened in Cineworld. Was Cineworld Glasgow and I think Aberdeen and I think maybe one of the others actually promoted the film using trailers. So we were trailed for a month leading up to the release of it. Unfortunately, in some of the other cinemas, and we were a little bit kind of caught out by this, did not advertise it, and we didn't realise they hadn't advertised it till day one of the release, and that was unfortunate. But I suppose there's kind of cheats in all places, and on the realisation I had afterwards about that is that the managers probably need to be courted a little bit. But your advice was spot on, and I think if we tried to do anything else, it would have absolutely bombed. As you say, it was the hottest weekend of the year, and that's when we launched, and we were up against some really, really big movies. There was a Tom Hanks movie and stuff, but I think we got sellout for, what was it, maybe 2.5 weeks, something like that. Mm-hmm. So we did really well.
I mean, I think looking at all the achievements for that film and the fact that it literally was on a shoestring, that's also where a lot of the learning came from. And on the back of it as well, because we were quite active in social media, that was attractive to other news outlets and stuff. Like, journalists love Twitter. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I know you've got a lot of connections and people were keen to talk to you, but I remember the day it opened, you were on forget the name of the show, but it was the one with Michelle McManus, and you got interviewed and stuff. I mean, there was a lot of coverage. There was a lot of coverage for this film. And the thing is, what you've got to remember is you're doing all this stuff, you're putting in all the graft, but when it comes to future projects, if you're looking for investment or you're looking for somebody to back you, the saying is you back the jockey, not the horse. Yeah. So they might have different opinions about what types of film they like personally. But if Carter Ferguson or, myself, if we are people who are producing and get results, that's what you want. And it's thinking about that kind of, you get paid back in so many other ways in the future. So it's not just about, right, how much money have you got, Carter? And no, I can't do it for you. It's just like, right, let's just do it. Let's get it done.
Well, that you've kind of brought us on to what we were going to talk about today. I've got a few other random questions I might throw at you along the way, but we're going to be talking about personal branding. So, what is personal branding? How?
Well, if you think about any brand, it's not just maybe a logo or a picture or something like that or a product. It's about what do they stand for. It can be things like your values. And if we're looking at individuals and personal branding, it's like, what are your values? What are you aligned with? Do you have integrity? I mean, I'm mentioning things that I deem important, but there's so much that people can take from what they see and read about you, and they build a mental picture. It's that thing where people say, nobody thinks of you the way you think of yourself. So I could ask you, what would you think of me? And some of the things you might say might surprise me. But it's very much about that personal branding, and people will arrive at their kind of viewpoint based on what they see and what they read. So coming down to sort of social media, I must admit, I'll put my hands up and say I'm guilty of helping everybody else, that I'm the last person to update my own profile sometimes.
Yeah.
But it is important to be visible. It is important to be seen. It's just how you can come across. So yeah, everything, like, I know you've got Angus and yeah, but what I would say is that straight away you're a dog lover. Okay. Mm-hmm. So that is just one aspect of you. But if somebody else is a dog lover or has a boxer even, it's like you are a good guy. They're more probably drawn to you, more aligned to you. So if you think about it in charity sort of context, lots of people are volunteers and they do charitable work. They raise money. And I'll quite often speak to businesses who do a lot of things behind the scenes and they don't talk about it. They worry about, well, I don't want to be seen to be talking about that because it's just something that I do. So I try and put the spin on it and get them, as I say, comfortable, being uncomfortable, and say, look, this isn't about you dining out and the fact that you are on the board and have raised money for this charity. This is also about you amplifying that charity's message and raising awareness. So if that helps you kind of reconcile it in your head, you need to be telling people about these things that you do, because people buy people before they buy anything else. So you could be absolutely spot on at what you do, but if they don't like you or they don't like what you stand for or some of the things you get involved in, they're not going to tell you. They're certainly not going to tell you, but you probably won't get the business either. So personal branding comes down to a number of factors, and it's just about what are you putting out there and what do people think you're all about, basically. Mm-hmm. If I could sum it up.
No, it's very interesting. I'm not sure I ever thought about it in specifically that way, and it never occurred to me that me posting pictures of Angus would make people like me more. But I totally get where you're coming from. And I post pictures of Angus because he's mental, and I like seeing that people like him. But yeah, it does have a broader implication, doesn't it?
It's a talking point as well. I mean, like, yes, I've got a young family, and I've chosen specifically not to put like things on sort of Twitter or anything like that about them. Yes. But what I have found is even just sometimes in speaking to people, since I've had the kids, I'm more relatable to some people. I don't mean that they've chosen to go with me because I've got kids, whereas they wouldn't have before. But it's just something that it's like people like similar people. So you've got to think about, I was going to say football teams, but football's a bad thing unless it's like Partick Thistle or something, but I think they're having a hard time just now as well. But yeah, it's about your values. It's about what's important to you and things that you do. I remember working with a company a few years ago that specialised in doing like lifts and like sort of engineers and things. Not very exciting. And if you don't have a lift, then it's not relevant. But the director, his father founded the business and he'd been diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And I said, you're doing a lot of good work and you want to raise awareness and you also want to let your existing customers know about your dad's condition, but in an easy way, if you like.
Yeah.
And I had said to them, why don't you do something for charity and set up a Just Giving page and say you're doing this and this is why you're doing it, a bit of a story, and you can raise money. And they were absolutely blown away. Once they got comfortable with the idea, they were blown away by the donations they'd raised. They were so chuffed because it meant that they were able to support the charity. And I said as well, at that time, my boyfriend's mum had motor neurons disease, and it was a charity and it was a kind of organisation that meant something to me. So just by seeing that they had a connection with it would have made me look at them more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my whole point. There's lots of charities that are very worthy, but there could be something that's particularly important to you, and it will be important to somebody else as well. So why not share that?
Yeah. It's kind of blowing my mind a little bit, some of this stuff, but I love what you're saying about amplifying other things,
Yeah.
because I think the struggle I had for many years is doing self-promotion. I felt like I was, I don't know, doing something wrong, being bad by wanting people to appreciate that I do stuff, or I don't know if I'm phrasing this particularly well. I found promoting myself just difficult. I was embarrassed by it, I think.
Yeah, that's a good word. That's a good word, because a lot of people are, they kind of struggle with it, but they know they have to sort of say it and do it. And think about somebody like Oprah Winfrey. Yes, she's very successful, and she's done a lot of things, but I don't think, oh, she's loaded. That's not the first thing that comes into my head. I think about all the things that she's done, what she stands for, and she's somebody that, if it comes, or even Richard Branson. I've never met Richard Branson, but I've got an opinion of him, and I'm quite drawn to him. And, that's kind of one of those things that there's just people out there that just have it and they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And some of it's unconscious and some of it's conscious. But I think being genuine, telling your story, about what you do, being consistent is really important as well. And, there will be times where it goes wrong, but you've just got to keep going. Don't be put off by something. You might put something out there and, people give you a hard time for it or whatever. I'm being a bit extreme, but,
I get it.
That's learning.
Well, it's like what you're saying earlier about you controlling your own world, or you controlling what you can control, and when something that you can't control happens, you can react to it, or people can look to what you've got out there and understand it. The thing that happened to me a couple of times is I had a quote from Winston Churchill in one of the quotes I was putting out to promote the show, and it was a good quote. It's about the one about, if you're going through hell, keep going. But each time that I post a quote from Churchill, I get attacked from people because laterally he's been regarded as racist and stuff like that. And there's still a lesson to be learned there, and I wasn't really aware of it. But that's the sort of, suddenly you're getting this negativity back at you for trying to give someone a bit of advice that actually should help them. But another thing, there's a load of stuff you talked about there that I've probably forgotten part of now. But one thing you mentioned there was about values and integrity right at the start. And that's something that quite recently, in fact, I can pin it down to 2 Christmases ago, I'd just come back from Hong Kong and I was prepping the New Year's episode. And lo and behold, it comes right back to Gillian Dick, this story I've just realised. Someone recommended Your Best Year Yet by Jenny Ditzler.
Yes.
And it was you that recommended it. And I've never stopped going on about that book either. I'm doing quite well this year to the schedule, by the way, to the plan that I made out. But within that, she asks you to write down what your values are. And I hadn't never considered it, but I hadn't considered it in a very, very long time that I did have values. And I found that some of the stuff I'd been involved in up to that point was going against my values, because my values are things like respect and respect was the specific one, and politeness and things like that. And I realised that some of the people I was working with, some of the stuff I was doing, had kind of hijacked me away from my own goals and values and integrity, and it was starting to take me down a line which I just didn't want to be involved in. And so I stepped away from a particular project at that point, where I just felt it was not in alignment with my values. And I think it's just such an important thing to get a hold of if people haven't considered it at all, or haven't considered it recently. Writing down what your goals are, not your goals are, your values are, will help you to go back on track and help you to make the right decisions in life.
The book, in fairness, it's my friend Kate. She had the book on her shelf for years. And I remember seeing it, because I quite like picking things up and just dipping in and out of it. And it sparked my interest. And I borrowed it from her. And I did it. And I did have my best year. And it was all about a plan. And I think that we all think making a plan is about writing down our goals. So now is a good time to, even if you haven't done it already, is to sit down and think about the next 12 months, because it doesn't even have to be the perfect calendar year in the sense of 1st of January to 31st December. It's about a time that's good for you.
Yeah.
So sitting down, thinking about the next 12 months, but, I could write down, I want more business, I want this, I want that, I want a new car, I want to have holidays. And these are all the end goal. But what I love about that book is it asks you the questions that you just don't even think are relevant. And it's a real wake up sort of moment, because it says, best practices, allow 3 hours for it and sit down. But I loved it because even talking about the different roles that you play in your life, for some people I'm a friend, for some people I'm a mentor, for some I'm their mum, I'm a daughter. And it's all those different roles in your life and what's important and all that. And it's such a good book. It's been around obviously for a long time, but I don't know if it's a bit retro, the fact that we're talking about it, but it goes back to what I said earlier on about it's the basic principles, and it's just sometimes revisiting them because we can go way off piste and we forget about it. And just going back to what you were saying about your values, it's really interesting because I think we're both Generation X, right? And there's a lot in this about millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, baby boomers, all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, I do place importance on things like integrity, politeness, manners, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what you will find is that if you can understand that because somebody's perhaps a different generation, what makes them tick, it'll just make your life easier as well. So I'm fascinated by behaviours and psychology, and I think that's why I'm able to kind of have success with social media, because that's what it all boils down to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of thinking, well, if I wanted to do work with you, what would you place importance on? And it's playing to those strengths and putting content out that you think, I like that, I like that, I like that. That ticks a box for me.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's subconscious as well. So, yeah.
I mean, it's subconscious, but at the same time, when we're talking about personal branding, if you've taken a few minutes of your time to write down what your values are, that will inform how you put yourself out into the world. And I think if people recognize those values, from I don't know if it's a value, or whatever, from being a dog lover to shows at least that you care for animals and things like that. But the integrity, whatever it is, that's surely got to be attractive to people that are observing what you're releasing, even if what you're releasing is not specific to that.
Dog lover is a perfect example because people just think, like you say, caring and all the rest of it. And they just make those assumptions. So, yeah, it fascinates me how people tick, and as I say, stuff that's maybe important to me, somebody that's younger would completely dismiss it, and we sometimes think how rude, or it's like timekeeping. And again, this goes back to do as I say, not as I do. Right? I've had to work on my timekeeping, and being late, I recognise for a lot of people, if somebody's late to a meeting, that's a sign of disrespect.
Yeah. And
I would never, ever want to come across as being disrespectful of somebody's time. But what I've realised is that sometimes I'm a wee bit ambitious with what I can achieve in time. So say I'm going to meet you. Yeah. If I say to you, right, Carter, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock for a coffee, usual place, right? And then you get a text message and I'm like, sorry, I'm running like 15 minutes late. And invariably, it's probably because I've thought, oh, do you know what? The bank opens at 9:30. I've got this check. I'll just nick in and do that. And then, it's great you get stuff done, but the reality is it pushes everything else back, and not meaning to be late for you, but just trying to do stuff. So that's just a small example. But if you didn't know me, doesn't make it acceptable, but if you didn't know me and that was our first meeting and I'm late, I'm just maybe setting the wrong example, and it could just be really detrimental. So that's a simple thing, but it's also something that you can control.
Yeah. The only issue,
kind of
I must raise, the only issue when you and I meet for a coffee on occasion is that car park that I have to park in only allows 2 hours, or you get a fine.
We only get chairs.
So.
it has a knock-on effect. We have to sort of go, right, let's go. But no, I mean, again, it's simple things, but timekeeping is a perfect example, because I think somebody dug me up years ago about it, and I was really quite upset, not as in like crying, but I was upset at the thought that they thought it was disrespectful. But it was what I needed to hear. It was a wake-up call.
Yeah.
And again, I remember going for a job years ago that I saw in the paper, and I went to an agency, and the guy interviewed me before he was going to put me forward as a candidate. And he asked me loads of questions, and he basically said to me, don't waste my time. go home, do a SWOT analysis on yourself, and unless you can answer those things, don't bother. But again, wake up call, because I went on to take his advice. I went and did the interview, did my best performance, if you like, best interview, got the job, and it was a great job, and it changed a lot of things for me. But I still apply some of those principles when I interview people, and younger people might be a bit shocked by it, but if somebody hasn't done their homework and taken their time to find out about a business or organisation, then I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. And it's simple things like that. So I find younger people sort of go, well, yeah, I can Google it, I can find out. And I'm like, you know what? That's fine. But see, if we've got a power cut or the internet's down, you're in trouble. You need to know it up here, as in their heads, rather than just, at their fingertips.
There's a lot to unpack in just what you're saying here, by the way. Can I just go back briefly to... honestly, I'm using a little whiteboard to write notes on occasion, but you're just filled with useful information. On the timekeeping thing, I've got I don't know if I read it somewhere or somebody told me, and it was early is on time is late. It's a kind of... if I've got a meeting, I try to get there early because that's on time, and that way if there is a slight delay, I'm still hopefully on time. But if I try to get there on time, there's a very good chance I could be late. So that's just something I've got in my head. But also, I think it was Tim Ferriss said something about scheduling, and this is really bad. This is not timekeeping on a for a meeting specifically, but was it Tim Ferriss? I can't remember. They said people underestimate what they can achieve. No, people overestimate what they can achieve in a year and underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. Yeah, and I certainly go with that, because I'm working to the Jenny Ditzler plan. My plan's all working, but oh my God, my overestimation of my abilities and is crazy. I keep yanking it back. Even if I make a plan now and put dates on it, I will literally double the dates, double the amount of time, and still I might not get the stuff done that I'm trying to get done within that schedule. What I do try to do now, though, is not beat myself up about it if I do miss deadlines.
Yeah. I think you've got to look at it and say, well, what did actually come up that stopped me achieving that? And was that better? Because when you set out to do something, you're looking to go from A to B. But sometimes by the time you get to B, which is never a straight road, I might add, your sights are already on C, or you've had a little detour. So again, it goes back to looking to build a business and stuff. Right now, the time that I've had at home, don't get me wrong, my days are pretty busy because I'm not as productive, or I'm certainly not having the sort of same output that I would if I was going to the office and working or having meetings, because I have to be mindful of my co-workers. But I'm still being really productive with what I've got available. And, it is, I've lost my train of thought there, but basically it is about being honest with yourself. But yeah, that's what I was going to say. This time right now, I've had some thoughts and ideas about other businesses that I could maybe look at setting up. And I know myself that, yes, you can have great ideas, you can write it down in a journal, but if you don't take action, it's never going to happen. And I'm already thinking, right, okay, use this time. This is a gift. We're going to look back on this time. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough if you work for yourself and your earnings are kind of impacted negatively, but I've got time to actually stop, catch up a bit and reflect and think about going forward, because I was on a bit of a hamster wheel, always busy and just not able to just sit and just think. And I'm getting some good ideas, I think, which I do intend to put into my kind of best year yet plan and start to make them happen. And going back to what you were saying about what you can achieve in a year versus 10 years, lots of people, when it was the end of the year, lots of people you may have noticed were doing the whole, it's a new decade, and they were talking about what they'd achieved in their last decade. And the only reason they were able to truly recall that was because this is the first decade that we've had digitally properly with like social media, even if it's just Facebook. You could look back at, I was at my friend's wedding in 2010 and look, I was a lot slimmer, but I didn't have the kids, I didn't have this, I hadn't done this, I hadn't achieved this. And it was great to be able to look back at the last decade and go, right, well, I've done that. What do I want to do in the next decade? So,
again, you're blowing my mind with the amount of stuff you're saying. Chasing new ideas? I read something about this. Or was it on a podcast I heard about it recently? And I can't remember actually, but they basically were saying, and I agreed with them, that you shouldn't chase every new idea right away. you should give yourself some time to think about it, because every new idea does not necessarily mean it's a great idea. That completing what you're working on at the moment,
yeah, I mean,
and then doing it is the right thing to do.
Don't be distracted. Like, you could have the best ideas, but if you've got actual work that needs to be completed and invoices that need to be done and money coming into the bank, that still has to be a priority.
Yeah.
But if you're in a position that you can afford to free up a bit of time, you can't force things either. Do your research. But I also see a lot of people who focus on perfection, and I have fallen into that far too many times myself. But it's not about having it absolutely perfect. It's about getting going, because nothing ever is perfect. And you personally can only control so much. So yeah, some of the ideas that I've just been thinking about it. And it's not that I'm an expert in these areas, but it was one thing in particular. I was looking for something for the kids, and I thought, that doesn't seem to exist.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's an opportunity. And I realised that the market potentially is there. And it's like, okay, I don't know much about that, but how would I go about it? And it's to do with a book, to be honest with you. But I kind of route to market, I know could be something like Amazon, because they do the kind of print to order. Yeah. And I've got a friend, in fact, my good friend Kate, who had that book on her shelf years ago. She's written a book, and she's a self-published author. But again, a lot of her experience and journey, I could even tap into that and say, like, what are your kind of tips and stuff like that as well. But in terms of the content, even, I know what I want to see, but I wouldn't be creating the content. So I need to be able to sort of go, right, where could I source that? How could I do that? What's the costs? And then once I've got a rough idea, I've just got to make it happen. Yeah. I can't try and do every single one, so I'm not saying it's like chicken soup for the soul, but if you think about the principle of that, that's one book that started, and then you've got lots and lots and lots to add to it. But don't get bogged down with buying up every single domain name and getting every single social media to handle. Just get going with it. And then if it starts to become viable, then you can put more money into it. Yeah. So, yeah.
The thing I think about when perfectionism comes up, because I've done episodes on it, is done is better than perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I have been bad over the years. I'm a bit of a kind of dot the I's, cross the T's. I'm probably very strong when it comes to going in and giving people strategy and putting all these things together and stuff like that. But if you were to ask me to go away and write a report, I'm much better just dissecting everything and saying, here you go. But I actually have somebody that works with me, and she sits and types things up. I talk and she types. And that sounds ridiculous, but that makes me sound like some sort of dictator. But
no, I think it's a good thing. Anything you can do to I've been really, really trying to delegate and really trying to work with people this year, and it's not been going well. But I it's because I totally recognise that I can go further with people than without them. Kind of what we were saying earlier about why you should pay people to do certain things. If I pay you to handle marketing on a movie, I can go ahead and make the next movie or do some other thing which is relevant. And just
so like
sorry, no, fire away.
No, I was just going to say, it's like, so on Monday, I know it was Easter Monday, but on Monday we sat on FaceTime, myself and my colleague, and we just sat for 2 hours. So there was a bit of human interaction as well, which was good given the current situation. And I was able to just look at things, and I had notes on my phone, I had notes written down, I had things on the computer, and I was pulling all these things up and saying, right, add that in, do this, do that, do that. But it helps me to collate my thoughts. And I know there are great apps out there that like Trello and Slack and all that, and project management, but I'm quite a visual person. And if you were around at my house right now, you would have a laugh, because my hall is decorated. Aside from children's artwork, it's got these large Post-its. I bought them on Amazon the other day, and I was so excited because they arrived, and I thought, great. And I've made lots of lists, because I love a list. And I know if I have to look at it, it's a visual thing for me. If I look at it, it gets done. So I have got these massive, I'm saying massive, they're like LP covers, if you're old enough to remember them. Yeah. And I've got lists of, I segment things. So it's, what do I want to achieve business-wise? What do I want to achieve in the home? What do I want for the kids? All that kind of stuff. And I put it all up there. And I got up really early yesterday morning. I was up at 5:30, and I enjoyed the silence, and I sat and I got everything out of my head.
Yes.
So I'm strong. It's sort of, I'm quite a visual person, and it's like, yes, but if you ask me to sit and write reports, I'm a bit rubbish. So when it comes down to perfectionism, if somebody said to me, can you do that report? By the time I do it and I'm happy with it, it might have passed. Whereas I've found now if I've got somebody that can capture it and we can get that over to somebody, it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I've not found that brilliant person to work with, partly because I'm dealing the fight direction stuff. I've just got to do it myself. I've got to write the risk assessments. I've got to be there and doing it. There's no way around it. But the trouble I've got with the podcast stuff is there is no money. It is a free thing that I do, that I give to people. So although there's some money coming into it, it costs me more than I bring in. But I'm loving the fact that you effectively are using these things in the same way that I use whiteboards. And even when I was talking on one of my last interviews, I was talking about whiteboards. We're kind of obsessed by them. And this week, at the start of the week, I did a brain dump because I was kind of, it's not that I was lost and knew what I needed to do, but I had forgotten or lost what was important and what needed to be prioritised. So I kind of went into that with a big brain dump. But I want to bring us back briefly to the personal branding thing, because I see, we were talking earlier about the values of people, but I see a lot of, and I don't know if it's just me having a negative bias, but I see a lot of what I think are fakes. I know there's definitely some liars online. There's that whole thing where we present our the sizzle reel of our own lives, the best parts of our own lives on there. But there's people on there, I reckon, are just plain liars. Do you see common weaknesses in how people present themselves online, and what might they be?
Well, I suppose a good example could be you've got somebody maybe on Twitter who during the week they're putting things out and they're very, this is what I think and I believe this and do this. And then maybe not so much now, but given that pubs are shut, but they go to the pub or they have a drink and they don't have that social filter and they start putting stuff out. And it's like, you know what, if you're going to have a drink, put your phone away, because don't be stupid. Don't be putting things out there because you could easily offend people. And that doesn't mean to say you can't have your own opinion, but you would undo a lot of good work. So I have historically seen a lot of guys who go on and will put things on, more so like sort of company directors and stuff, but just kind of like their behaviour is a bit disappointing, you know. Yeah. And I know everybody quite often can say, well, you know, it's just somebody had a drink, but you want to stay off like social media when it comes to that. But if you think about people being fake and being false, I mean, I love social media for business, commercially, but in a personal context, it has its limits. I don't think it's great for people's mental health in general. I think you have to be quite disciplined about how much you expose yourself to. Same goes for the news right now. And what I would say is, if you look at Instagram, it's all about the gram, it's all about the likes, it's all about popularity. Look at me. I want people to understand, especially younger people as well, that if I see somebody putting something on and they're crying out for attention, that's probably somebody that's got low self-esteem. Yeah. And, you know, it's kind of trying to dissect. I'm not dissecting people's posts. I mean, everybody likes to have something that's popular, but everything on Instagram is filtered and life is not like that. Yeah. And, you know, younger people, I think, are going to be victims more to this kind of mental health time bomb because they see this stuff all the time. Whereas I know it's not real. Take it with a pinch of salt. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so it's using it in the right way, but also not kidding yourself on either. Because anybody can get lots of likes, but you could have a situation where that is very much going to determine your moods and stuff and things like that as well. Mm-hmm. So, do you know one thing that I cannot stand, and it sounds like I'm contradicting myself here, people that rant on social media. Yeah. Right? You've got to read 13 different replies to the first post. They have a rant, and I feel like saying, who cares? In fact, that's a question that I ask myself often just before I go to post something. And it's those two words, who cares? Yeah. That it could be, it's like, does somebody actually care about what you're going to post? Or nobody cares, Gillian. Just like save it. Yeah. And it stops me posting. And as I've got older, I'd like to think I've got wiser, but I post a lot less. Just got to think about that kind of stuff as well. So I hope that kind of answers your point. No, it certainly does. I try not to rant. I try to give myself a little bit of time, or I won't hit send. Sometimes I'll spend 10 minutes, 15 minutes writing something, and then I won't post it because I read it back and read it back and read it back and go, I can't say this. But then there's other times, I don't drink, but like if I'm tired, I might post something that in the morning I go, that's not right. Have you got one of your visitors? I'm sorry, yes, that's I do have a visitor. But do you want to take a wee 5-minute break just now, Gillian, and we'll pick it up in 5 minutes? Absolutely, that's perfect. Great. Okay,
Cool.
thanks very much.
I'll call you back then. Cheers.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Well, that was a very opportune moment there for Gillian's kids to come and intervene, and the rest of this jam-packed discussion can be heard in episode 66. It's just 30 minutes long, and it's available right now. I've done the edit on it already, and it just keeps on giving. This discussion has had so much in it, I couldn't cut any more out of it, so you really should, if you've got the time just now, go right on and listen to that one. In the meantime, though, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Anna, who wanted nothing more than to support myself and Angus, my dog. And it's rather amusing that it goes along completely, Anna's sponsorship, with what Gillian was saying today about Angus being part of my personal branding. So hopefully that actually backs up what Gillian was saying there. Anna insisted on the wording that starts this, by the way, and it was something like Anna from the Angus the Dog fan club, and I was more than happy to say that. Absolutely fantastic. But a big thanks to Gillian for giving us her time and her knowledge today. And I want to end this show with a little correction to something I said within the chat. It wasn't Tim Ferriss who said it, though. It was Bill Gates. He said, most people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And that was Bill Gates that actually said that one. Now take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The music that you can hear right now is Adventures by Ehimitsu. You can view the show notes for this episode on the official website, filmproproductivity.com. Now you can follow my personal account on Twitter and Instagram at fight_director if you want to see pictures of my dog Angus mostly. Or you can follow the show's official account on Twitter at filmproprodpod or on Facebook, which I do occasionally check, at filmproproductivity. Please continue to support the show by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an awesome review.